The clock struck midnight inside a small-town diner. A woman in a worn apron carried coffee to a table, where cruel laughter echoed. They mocked her exhaustion, her life, her struggle. But that night, engines thundered outside and the town's laughter died when unexpected guardians walked through the door. Before we begin, tell us where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Your every comment, gift and membership helps us bring more heart-touching stories to your life. The Bellwood Diner sat on the edge of Highway 12, its neon lights buzzing against the dark. Inside, the world slowed. Mismatched booths held truckers, late-shift workers, and teenagers who should have been home hours ago. But at the center of it all was Claire Dawson. Her apron was faded, strings tied too tight around her waist, her hair pinned back to hide how tired she really was. Each cup of coffee she poured carried a piece of her strength, and each smile was forced through exhaustion. People whispered when she walked by, how she worked nights after long days, how her husband left and never looked back. And though she tried to ignore it, the laughter cut deep. The sound of forks clinking wasn't just noise, it was judgment. Claire swallowed it quietly night after night. The world thought she was invisible, but she held it together. For the little boy asleep at home who still believed his mother could move mountains. At home, Claire's son Jacob was only 8. His room was filled with superhero posters, a quiet reminder of the kind of hero he thought his mom was. But Claire knew the truth. Heroes didn't cry in the pantry when bills piled up. Heroes didn't wonder if the electricity would still be on by morning. She carried that weight in silence. Each night at the diner wasn't just a job, it was survival. The regulars mocked her double shifts, saying she had no life, but they never saw the child who ran into her arms at dawn when she came home smelling of coffee and fried eggs. The ache in her feet, the bruise on her pride. None of it mattered when Jacob whispered, "You're the best, Mom." Still, in the dead of night, when the laughter of the cruelest customers rang out, Claire wondered if she was fooling everyone. Could she hold out much longer, or would life finally break her down? That Friday night was worse than most. A group of young men in button-down shirts swaggered in, loud from whatever bar they'd left. They weren't there for coffee or pie, they came for sport. Their eyes landed on Claire and one of them smirked. "What's it like working graveyard forever? Guess college didn't work out, huh?" His friends laughed, the sound sharp enough to sting. Claire forced a smile, setting down menus with hands that trembled. She had been through worse. At least that's what she told herself. But humiliation never grew easier. They kept pressing, louder each time. "Bet you're saving for that kid of yours. Cute story, single mom, no time, no future." The diner grew quiet. Other patrons looked down, too afraid to speak. Even the cook in the back pretended not to hear. Claire bit her tongue, swallowed her pride, and scribbled down their order. Inside, her chest burned. She knew if she snapped back, she might lose the only thing keeping a roof over Jacob's head. The hours dragged on. Orders came and went. The cruel group sat longer than anyone, making sure every word they spoke carried weight. Claire walked past their table when one muttered just loud enough, "Guess some women don't know when to quit." She flinched. Her hands shook as she poured coffee for an old trucker, the steam clouding her glasses. The trucker gave her a small nod, a silent act of respect, but said nothing more. Outside, the world was empty, just the hum of the highway and flicker of neon. Inside, Claire's chest felt hollow. She thought about Jacob, sleeping peacefully, believing his mum was stronger than steel. If only he knew the cracks forming beneath her surface. As she refilled another cup, she whispered under her breath, "One more night, just one more night." But the ache in her bones told her she was near breaking. And then, the faint, distant sound of engines began to echo through the night. At first, it was just a low rumble, so soft that only Claire noticed. She froze by the counter, coffee pot in hand. The sound grew louder, rolling like thunder. Heads turned toward the window as chrome flashed under the streetlight. One motorcycle became 2, then 6, then more, until the air outside vibrated. The cruel group laughed nervously. "What is this, a parade?" One joked, but his voice cracked. The trucker in the corner set down his mug, his lips curling into a knowing smile. The door swung open, and with it came the scent of leather, oil, and cold night air. They entered not rowdy, not wild, but steady, like a tide rolling in. Their jackets bore a name that made whispers ripple through the diner: Hell's Angels. Claire's heart skipped. For years people told stories about them, feared them, misunderstood them. But what none of those laughing customers knew was this: sometimes the people the world fears most are the ones willing to stand where no one else will. Claire's breath caught as the group filled the diner. Their boots thudded softly against the linoleum, jackets heavy with patches that told a history most dared not ask about. She clutched the coffee pot, unsure whether to welcome them or hide. The cruel men at the corner booth went silent, their smirks slipping as the bikers spread out. The leader, a broad man with a silver beard and eyes that burned steady, tipped his head toward Claire. "Evening, ma'am." His voice was calm, respectful, almost gentle. She managed a nod, setting the pot back on the counter. The rest of the diner seemed to hold its breath, waiting. The cruel men forced a laugh. "Guess the circus rolled into town," one muttered, too low to sound confident. The silver-bearded man's gaze slid over, sharp as a blade, but he didn't speak. Instead, he pulled out a stool and sat. The silence felt heavier than any words. Claire realized something was about to shift forever. The silver-bearded biker looked at Claire, his expression steady. "Coffee, Black. And a slice of pie, if you've got it." The request was ordinary, but his tone made it feel like something more, a deliberate gesture of respect. Claire's hands trembled as she poured his cup. He accepted it with a nod, sipping carefully as if he had all the time in the world. The others followed suit, ordering simple plates, burgers, fries, eggs. No noise, no trouble, just presence. The cruel men at the booth shifted uncomfortably, watching. "So what is this?" One sneered. "Your retirement home." A younger biker, tattoos curling up his neck, leaned forward. His smile was thin. "It's supper," he said. The words landed like a warning. Claire noticed how the rest of the customers relaxed, shoulders easing, as if they finally felt safe. For the first time all night, she wasn't carrying the weight alone. Something about their calmness felt like a shield being quietly built around her. The cruel men couldn't stand the shift. Their spotlight was fading, and they wanted it back. One of them, tall and wiry, pushed back his chair with a scrape that cut the silence. He swaggered toward the counter, smirking at Claire. "Hey, sweetheart, don't forget who your regulars are." His hand brushed the tip jar, rattling the coins. Before Claire could respond, the silver-bearded biker set down his fork with a soft clink. He didn't stand. He didn't raise his voice. He just said, "Leave it." The wiry man turned, scoffing. "Excuse me?" The biker's gaze was steady, unblinking. "You heard me." The diner froze, the tension thicker than smoke. Claire's chest tightened, fear prickling her skin. She wanted to tell them not to fight, not here, but the cruel man hesitated, caught in that steel stare. For the first time, his bravado cracked. And in that pause, everyone understood. The balance of power had shifted, and the night was far from over. Claire couldn't look away from the silver-bearded biker. There was something in his eyes, a weight that wasn't just muscle or leather, it was history. She saw it in the quiet way he chewed his food, in the way he treated her like she mattered. It had been years since anyone had looked at her that way. Not with pity, not with judgment, just respect. The cruel men muttered under their breath, but their laughter had thinned. The trucker in the corner watched with a faint grin, as though he'd seen storms like this before. Claire's heart slowed for the first time that night. She didn't know why, but she felt protected, safe. For years she had carried her world alone. But here, in this strange moment, a wall of leather and steel sat between her and the cruelty she'd faced. And though she didn't yet know their names, she realized these men were not here by accident. The wiry man wasn't done. He slammed his palm on the counter, rattling the sugar jars. "You don't tell me what to do," he spat, leaning close to Claire. She froze, the smell of cheap whiskey heavy on his breath. The silver-bearded biker rose slowly, towering but calm. His hand rested lightly on the man's shoulder, not gripping, just steady. "You've had your fun," he said, voice low. "Now sit down." The diner's walls seemed to vibrate with the silence that followed. The cruel man glanced at his friends, waiting for backup, but their eyes darted nervously, none willing to meet his gaze. Slowly, reluctantly, he slumped back toward his booth. Claire let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The biker returned to his seat, lifting his coffee again as if nothing had happened. The power of that quiet control rippled through the room. And for the first time, Claire thought, maybe the stories about them weren't all true. As she wiped down the counter, Claire's mind drifted. Years ago, when her husband left, she'd heard whispers about how a woman like her couldn't last on her own, that she'd fold, break, collapse, but night after night she proved them wrong, even when the world laughed. Her apron strings became armor, her smile a mask. Yet the weight of those voices had never left her. Now, watching the bikers sit in quiet solidarity, she wondered if fate was giving her a message. Perhaps strength wasn't always about standing alone. It was about who stood with you when the crowd turned cruel. She glanced at the leader again, his silver beard catching the neon light. He caught her stare, offered the smallest nod, and returned to his coffee. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Claire felt a crack in the wall she'd built around herself. For the first time in years, she let herself believe she wasn't invisible. Rain began to hammer against the diner windows, streaking the glass like silver threads. The highway outside was empty, just the flashing hazard lights of the bikers' parked motorcycles. Inside, the cruel group had gone quiet, whispering among themselves. One of them tried to laugh, but it sounded hollow. The storm outside mirrored the one inside Claire's chest, chaotic, unpredictable, yet strangely cleansing. She refilled the bikers' cups, each thank you soft but genuine. They weren't saints, that much was clear. Their scars, their tattoos, their heavy silence told stories she couldn't imagine. But they carried themselves with a dignity the others lacked. As thunder rolled, the wiry man tried again, forcing a grin. "Guess you've got new friends, huh, sweetheart?" But this time the insult didn't sting. Claire met his eyes, steady, unflinching. She didn't answer. She didn't need to, because for once she wasn't standing alone. The storm outside raged, but inside something steadier was taking root. While clearing plates, Claire accidentally dropped her wallet. It hit the floor, spilling open to reveal a folded photo. One of the bikers picked it up before she could. He unfolded it carefully, revealing a picture of Jacob grinning, missing 2 front teeth, holding a baseball glove too big for his hand. The biker studied it for a moment, then handed it back with surprising gentleness. "Your boy?" he asked. Claire nodded, embarrassed. "Yeah, he's my reason." The man smiled faintly, a rare softness breaking through his rough exterior. "Good reason." The silver-bearded leader glanced at the photo too, his expression unreadable. For Claire it was a vulnerable moment, one she usually guarded fiercely. But instead of judgment, all she saw was understanding. For a heartbeat, the diner wasn't filled with fear or cruelty. It was filled with something else, respect. And Claire realized these men, feared by many, saw her not as a punchline, but as what she truly was, a fighter. The cruel group, desperate to reclaim control, tried one last trick. One of them whistled, loud and mocking. "Hey, how much are you making tonight, sweetheart? Enough for that kid of yours?" His words echoed, sharp as broken glass. Claire stiffened, her hand tightening around the coffee pot. Before she could speak, the silver-bearded biker stood again. This time his tone was final. "Enough." The word was simple, but it carried the weight of thunder. The cruel man chuckled, pretending not to be rattled. "And who's going to stop me? You?" The biker stepped closer, calm but immovable. "Me. and every one of us. Chairs shifted as the rest of the bikers rose, a silent wall of leather and steel. The cruel men paled, their bravado crumbling. They muttered excuses, tossing bills on the table, and hurried out into the storm. The door slammed shut behind them, leaving only the hum of rain and the quiet strength of those who remained. Silence lingered after the cruel men left, broken only by the patter of rain. Claire stood frozen, unsure what to say. The bikers sat back down as though nothing had happened, finishing their meals. The trucker chuckled softly. "Been a long time since I've seen folks like that shut down so fast." Claire finally found her voice. I don't know how to thank you." The silver-bearded leader looked up, eyes steady. "You don't owe us a thing. Nobody deserves what they threw at you." His words struck deep. For years Claire had carried her battles quietly, believing gratitude was something she owed the world for simply surviving. But now, for the first time, someone had stood up for her, not because they wanted anything, but because she deserved better. It was a truth she'd almost forgotten. And standing there, apron-stained and tired beyond measure, Claire felt something she hadn't in a very long time: dignity. As the night wore on, the bikers finished their meals. One by one, they placed bills on the counter, more than enough to cover their food. Claire blinked, realizing it was several times the cost. "I can't take this," she protested, shaking her head. The silver-bearded leader met her eyes. "You can, because you've earned it." He slid the last bill across, his hand steady. "For the boy." Claire's throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to insist she didn't need charity, but this wasn't charity. This was recognition, respect, a reminder that her fight hadn't gone unseen. She pressed her hand over her mouth, tears slipping past her guard. "Thank you," she whispered. The leader gave a small nod, nothing more. Sometimes gratitude didn't need speeches. Sometimes it was enough to stand tall, to know someone else saw the truth of who you were. And that night, Claire felt seen in a way that rewrote her tired soul. When the rain eased, the bikers rose, leaving quietly as they had come. Claire followed them to the door, the neon glow painting their jackets in red and blue. Engines roared to life, steady and powerful, rolling like a storm fading into the distance. She stood in the doorway, arms folded tight, watching them disappear down the highway. For a moment she wished she could call them back, to say more, to let them know what their presence had given her. But she stayed silent, the hum of engines carrying her gratitude into the night. Behind her the diner felt different, lighter. The cruel laughter was gone, replaced by something steadier. Claire walked back inside, touching the counter where the money still lay. Her hands shook, but not from fear this time. It was from the weight of a truth she hadn't realized she'd been starving for. She wasn't fighting alone anymore. Somewhere out there, steel guardians had reminded her of her worth. When Claire came home at dawn, Jacob was waiting, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Mom, you're late!" She scooped him up, holding him close, breathing in the innocence of his messy hair and sleepy smile. "Sorry, buddy. Long night." He noticed the bills she carried and frowned. "Did someone give you that?" Claire hesitated, then nodded. "Friends. They wanted to help." Jacob's eyes widened. "Like superheroes?" She laughed softly, brushing his cheek. "Something like that." She didn't tell him about the cruel words, the danger. He didn't need to know. All he needed to believe was that the world still had protectors. And maybe, just maybe, so did his mom. As Jacob ran to grab his baseball glove, Claire lingered at the window, watching the sunrise. Her heart felt different, still tired, still heavy, but steadier. Last night hadn't erased her struggles, but it had given her something more precious: hope. And hope, she realized, could carry her further than fear. By Sunday morning, the story had spread. The same people who once whispered about Claire now spoke in hushed tones about what happened at the diner. Some said the bikers had stormed in like an army. Others claimed they'd barely spoken, only their presence enough to silence cruelty. Either way, everyone agreed. The men who mocked Claire left in shame. For the first time, the laughter in town wasn't at her expense. It was at theirs. Claire walked through the grocery store that afternoon, chin higher than usual. People nodded at her, some even smiling. She knew gossip was fickle, but for once the whispers didn't sting. Instead, they felt like a strange kind of justice. She didn't need the town's approval, not anymore. She had learned a deeper truth, that respect comes not from those who laugh at your pain, but from those who stand beside you in silence when the world turns cruel. That night, as Claire tucked Jacob into bed, he asked the question she hadn't expected. "Mom, do you think heroes ride motorcycles?" She paused, smiling faintly. "Sometimes they do. Sometimes they wear leather jackets. And sometimes they just sit quietly and make sure the bad guys don't win." Jacob grinned, satisfied, drifting off to sleep with the innocence only children carry. Claire sat beside him, listening to his breathing, her heart heavy but full. Life wouldn't suddenly become easy. Bills would still come. Nights would still be long. But the memory of roaring engines and quiet protection stayed with her. It was a reminder that dignity could be defended, that kindness could arrive in unexpected forms. As she turned off the light, Claire whispered to herself, "I'm not invisible." Outside, the wind carried echoes of engines fading into the horizon, and in those echoes lived a truth she would never forget. Even the most ordinary lives are worth guarding. Life tests us in silence, but sometimes the right people show up to remind us we're not alone. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and press the bell icon. More stories like this are waiting for you.